I've tried to forget the sound, the hum that tore the world in half, a vibration so low it felt like the earth was breathing beneath me. 1 second I was crouched behind the twisted hull of a burned-out vehicle, rain and gunpowder filling my lungs. The next, there was only light, metallic, soundless, infinite light. I remember reaching out. I thought it was the reflection of the sun on shrapnel, something harmless, something known. But when my fingers brushed it, the world folded inward. Time didn't move forward or backward, it collapsed. And inside that collapse, I heard my own heartbeat echo like it belonged to someone else. When I woke, my wrist bled. Iron rings, chains, mud beneath my cheek, not asphalt. A sky too wide, too clean, too real to be the one I knew. For days I thought it was a dream, or hell, the kind reserved for soldiers who had done too much, seen too much, and lost too many. But dreams don't ache like this. They don't have the smell of wet straw and rust, or the taste of blood when you bite your tongue just to stay awake through the pain. You would think a man born of war could adapt to anything, but nothing in the modern world prepares you for silence, for the absence of hums, drones, signals, and static, for a world where fire is the only light and words like mercy are whispered as myth. They called me the Iron Ghost before I learned their language. I suppose it was the eyes, or maybe the way I refused to kneel. If you're hearing this, whoever you are, then the gate is still open. And I need you to understand something, that what lies beyond isn't a punishment or a miracle. It's a mirror. It shows you everything you thought you were, then melts it down until only the core remains. I was a soldier once, a maker of destruction. Now I forge swords for kings, and I fell in love with the daughter of the man who chained me. This is not a confession of guilt. It's a record of how a man dies twice and still finds something worth living for. It began the night the sky turned red over the mines, when the first hammer struck the anvil, and I realized the sound was my own heart. They woke us before dawn. The guards moved through the sleeping pits like shadows, kicking at ribs, shouting in a language I only half understood. A cold wind poured through the iron grates above, carrying the smell of ash and horses. Somewhere outside, a bell tolled once, twice, a metallic heartbeat counting the start of another day in someone else's world. I dragged myself up, the chain between my ankles clinking in the mud. My body was heavier than I remembered, not from exhaustion, from difference. The scars on my arms weren't mine. The skin was darker, thicker, corded with muscle shaped by labor, not training. Whoever this body had been, it wasn't a soldier. It was a worker, a slave. The others avoided my eyes. Maybe they saw what I didn't. That flicker of disorientation, the strange way I moved, the quiet calculation behind my silence. The modern mind is a curse when you're trapped in an ancient cage. Every instinct screams for logic, but logic here is treason. They herded us through a tunnel carved into rock. The air grew hotter with each step until the walls began to glow faintly red. Then came the sound, the rhythmic clang of metal on metal, echoing like distant thunder. The forge. The blacksmith was a mountain of a man, his skin blackened by soot, eyes the pale gray of a spent storm. He didn't speak. He pointed to the bellows, then to the anvil. I understood, work or die, so I worked. At first, the heat tore the breath from my lungs. The hammer was heavier than any rifle I'd carried, but there was something familiar in the rhythm. Strike, lift, breathe. Strike, lift, breathe. It was like gunfire slowed to the pace of a heartbeat. By the end of the day, my palms were blistered and raw, but the metal I shaped gleamed like something alive. The blacksmith noticed. He didn't praise me, but he didn't strike me either. That was enough. That night I lay on the dirt floor of the slave barracks, staring at the beams above. My mind wandered to the war, the flashes of light, the faces I lost. If this was the afterlife, it was strangely ordered. Pain had rules here, and rules can be learned. A boy, maybe 15, crawled closer in the dark. His name was Loran. He whispered it like a secret. "You don't talk like us," he said. "You're not from any place I know." I smiled faintly. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." He nodded, serious. "You were chosen by the gate." That word again. Gate. I'd heard the guards mutter it too, when they dragged me in, bloodied and dazed. I thought it was a title or a curse, but in his voice, it was something closer to awe. He told me stories of a metallic doorway buried in the northern mines, said to hum when storms passed overhead, of men who entered and never returned, of the last one, a warrior centuries ago, who came out changed and brought the kingdom both glory and ruin. "Maybe you're him," Loran said sleepily. "Maybe you came back." I didn't answer, because part of me deep down was afraid he might be right. The days bled together after that. Work, sleep, silence. Yet with each swing of the hammer, something inside me steadied. I began to recognize the metals by their scent, the way heat changed their voice. Iron sang, steel whispered, bronze complained. The forge became an instrument, and I, its unwilling musician. Then one morning everything shifted. A caravan arrived. Soldiers in polished armor, a banner with a black sun. They brought inspection orders from the palace. The slaves lined up, heads bowed. I did the same. The commander dismounted, his boots gleaming. But it wasn't him who caught my eye. She did. A woman cloaked in deep blue stepped down from the carriage. No jewelry, no crown. Yet the air around her bent as if the world itself hesitated to touch her. Her gaze swept over the line of slaves, detached, measured, until it met mine. For a heartbeat, the forge fell silent. The air between us was sharp as steel. She frowned, not in disgust, but in recognition. The commander leaned toward her, whispering. She shook her head slightly. Then in a voice calm and low, she said to him, "Leave this one. I wish to see how he works." The others gawked. A slave chosen by a royal? That was an omen. The guards shoved me forward. She stood near the forge, the light painting her face in amber and shadow. "You work with precision," she said, watching me shape the molten metal. "Who taught you?" I hesitated. "No one here." A pause, just long enough for meaning to bloom. Her eyes softened, then darkened, as though she understood something I hadn't said. When she turned to leave, she spoke again, her words half lost under the roar of fire. "Keep your fire steady, Iron Ghost. A blade's true strength isn't in the strike. It's in how long it endures the heat." And then she was gone. That night, as the forge cooled, I whispered the phrase to myself, "How long it endures the heat." In the faint reflection of the dying coals, my own eyes stared back. Older, colder, yet alive in a way they hadn't been for years. Maybe this wasn't punishment after all. Maybe it was the beginning of something I was meant to finish long ago. The days that followed her visit stretched like the silence before a storm. The guards treated me differently. Not kinder, just more careful, as if the touch of a royal gaze had made me dangerous. Lauren whispered that she was the king's daughter, Lady Elira of the House of Vareth. I laughed at the absurdity. Princes and generals in my old world had daughters too, but none of them ever looked at a soldier the way she had looked at me. Not like I was a tool, but a question. Still, her words lingered like smoke. A blade's true strength is how long it endures the heat. I carried them with me into the forge, where every blow of the hammer felt like an echo of that idea. But endurance is a fragile virtue when power notices you. One morning, as dawn light spilled through the cracks in the roof, the blacksmith, the silent giant, slammed a new order onto the table. A commission from the palace. 20 blades forged to perfection before the next full moon. The seal of the royal guard pressed deep into wax. He grunted at me. You? Take lead. I stared at him, confused. I'm a slave. He met my eyes for the first time since I arrived. Not today. Then he shoved a hammer into my hands and walked out. The others froze. The forge was sacred ground. To lead the work meant trust or madness. Lauren gaped. They'll hang you if the blades aren't perfect. I've been killed once already, I muttered. So we worked. Heat and rhythm, sweat and sparks. The world narrowed to the sound of metal breathing. I found myself teaching the others, showing them how to shape the curve of a sword so it wouldn't fracture under stress, how to quench the blade evenly, not in panic, but in patience. They watched me like I was performing alchemy. By nightfall, our first blade gleamed like frozen lightning. And that's when the trouble began. The overseer, a rat-faced man named Corvin, came down from his quarters, his armor polished too bright for someone who'd never lifted a sword. He examined the blade, ran a thumb along the edge, and smiled the way men smile before cruelty. You think you're clever, Ghost? He hissed. You work too well. Makes the rest look lazy. Then he raised the blade, my blade, and brought it down across Loran's back. The sound was soft. Flesh doesn't ring like steel. Lauren fell, gasping. Something in me broke. Not the soldier's restraint, not the slave's fear. Something older. Before I knew it, I had Corvin by the throat, the tip of the unfinished sword pressed under his chin. The other slaves stared, horrified. The forge light painted the room in blood orange. You ever touch him again? I said, my voice low. And I'll teach you what real heat feels like. He wheezed, trying to laugh. You'll hang before dusk. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't care. But the blacksmith appeared in the doorway, silent, towering. His hand came down heavy on my shoulder. Enough, he said. To my surprise, he didn't strike me. He looked at Corvin. The boy lives. The blade stands. Take your complaint to the king if you dare. Corvin spat and stormed out, muttering curses. The blacksmith turned to me. His voice was softer now. You don't understand this world yet. Here, strength isn't what keeps you alive. Restraint is. I wanted to argue, but the truth of it cut deeper than any sword. When he left, Lauren was still trembling. I tore a strip from my tunic and pressed it to his wound. He winced, then whispered, Why did you risk that? Because I couldn't watch another innocent bleed for someone's pride. Because the ghosts of my old world already screamed too loud. Because some lines, no matter the century, can't be crossed. But I only said, because I remember being free. That night I expected punishment. Instead, a messenger came, cloaked in royal blue. He said nothing, only handed me a folded parchment sealed with wax, the sigil of the House of Vareth. Inside, in fine handwriting, was a single line. You endure well, Iron Ghost. The forge tests more than metal. I stared at it until the ink blurred. The next day, when I entered the forge, I found a new piece of metal waiting. Pale, strange, unlike any alloy I'd seen. The blacksmith nodded toward it. Royal request, he said. You're to shape this one yourself. As I touched the metal, it vibrated, faintly, rhythmically. The same hum that once tore the battlefield apart, the gate's voice, and for the first time since I arrived in this world, I felt it again, that impossible pull between past and present, between what I was and what I was becoming. Somewhere deep inside the metal, something was awake. The metal haunted me. Even after the forge cooled, I could feel its hum through my skin, a faint vibration in the bones, like the echo of a machine that once kept time with my heart. The others refused to touch it. They said it came from the royal mines, from beneath the mountains where the gate once appeared. They called it sky iron, but I knew that resonance. I'd heard it in a different life, in the field generators that split the air, in the armored hulls of vehicles that hum before detonation, the sound of human invention. Except this wasn't human, not in the way I understood the word. I began shaping it alone, working late after the others slept. The blacksmith pretended not to notice. His silence was permission. The metal fought me at first, refusing to yield, but the longer I worked, the more it seemed to breathe with me. Each strike sang a note I could almost recognize, a pattern, a memory. And then she returned. Lady Elira entered without announcement. The forge flared brighter, as if recognizing her. Her cloak was simpler this time, deep green, the color of forest shadows. She moved like someone used to silence, her eyes sharper than the swords hanging on the walls. "I was told you were working with the new alloy," she said. "They say it burns through most forges. Yet you still stand." "I've survived worse burns," I replied. A faint smile ghosted her lips. "So they say. The iron ghost who feels no pain." Her gaze wandered to the half-formed blade on my anvil. "What do you call it?" I hesitated. "I haven't decided." "Then don't rush. A name defines what a thing becomes." She reached out, fingers bare, and hovered just above the glowing metal. The air between her hand and the blade shimmered faintly, as if magnetized. Her eyes flicked toward me. "You feel it too, don't you? The pulse." I studied her face. "You know what this is." "I know it shouldn't exist," she whispered. "The last time the sky iron sang, kingdoms fell." Her words hung there, heavy and quiet. I watched her, wondering what kind of princess speaks of ruin like a historian instead of a child of privilege. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Walk with me." She led me through the side door into the courtyard. Night had already folded over the sky, torches painting the stone walls golden black. The smell of forge smoke clung to me, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she asked, "Do you remember who you were before this place?" A dangerous question. Does anyone? "You do," she said softly. "I can see it in your eyes. You look at this world like it's a map you've already read." I wanted to laugh, but the truth of it burned too close. "If I told you what I remember, you'd think I was mad." Her eyes didn't leave mine. "Try me." So I did. Not everything, just fragments. The war, the machines, the sound that tore the world apart. How I touched the light and woke up here, chained and nameless. I told it without embellishment, like a confession I'd carried too long. When I finished, she didn't speak right away. Then, to my shock, she said, "My father would call you cursed, but my mother, she would have called you chosen." "Chosen for what?" "To remind us what we've forgotten." She looked up at the sky. "The old songs say the gate was never meant to bring destruction. It was meant to bring memory, to test whether we could bear the truth of what we once were." Her words made no sense, yet somehow they did. Because part of me had begun to suspect that this wasn't random, that the gate hadn't thrown me backward by accident. It had sent me here for something unfinished. She turned back to me. "Keep working on the blade. When it's done, bring it to me yourself. Not through the guards, through me. That might get me killed. Then it will be worth dying for something real." Her voice was calm, almost defiant. She didn't belong in this century any more than I did. Before leaving, she reached out and brushed a smear of soot from my cheek with her thumb. An impossible gesture, fleeting but warm. For the first time since I'd arrived in this world, I didn't feel like a stranger. After she left, I stood in the silence of the forge, staring at the blade. The metal no longer resisted me. It flowed beneath the hammer, singing clearer, stronger. Each strike carried her voice, her certainty, her fire. When I quenched the blade at dawn, the hiss filled the air like a whisper of life. Steam rose, carrying the faint outline of her reflection in the water. Lauren limped in, rubbing his back, grinning faintly. You met her again, didn't you? I didn't answer. He looked at the blade and whistled. It looks alive. It is, I said quietly. I didn't tell him the truth, that I'd heard it breathe, that somewhere inside the steel, something ancient had awakened, something that hummed the same rhythm as my heart. The sword was finished, and I wasn't the same man who began forging it. By the time the blade cooled, I could no longer tell where my heartbeat ended and its hum began. The sword wasn't forged, it was born, smooth as water, dark as night. When held to the light, veins of blue shimmered beneath its surface, pulsing faintly, alive. I should have been afraid of it. Instead, I felt something close to peace. But peace doesn't last long in kingdoms built on fear. Words spread through the forge like smoke. The iron ghost had forged a blade that sang. The blacksmith said nothing, though I saw him watching me with the same expression a man wears when he recognizes the storm before it hits. That morning, soldiers arrived to test the weapons before shipment. Corvin led them, his lips still swollen from the last time he'd crossed me. His grin was all venom. Let's see what miracle the ghost has conjured. He ordered one of his men to strike the new blade with a mace. The sound it made wasn't the dull clang of steel. It was sharp, pure, resonant. The mace shattered. The soldiers fell silent. Corvin's grin faltered. He grabbed the sword himself, sneering. A trick of the forge. He swung it at a column of stone. The blade didn't chip. Instead, a faint ripple of light pulsed along its edge, and the stone cracked down the middle, splitting with a soft sigh. The courtyard went still. Even the wind seemed to pause. He dropped the sword, pale-faced. Witchcraft, he spat. The king will hear of this. But before he could move, the sound of hooves echoed through the yard. A royal procession entered, banners fluttering black and gold. At the center rode him, the king of Varith. He was older than rumor claimed, his beard streaked with silver, his armor engraved with the sigil of the sun devouring its own rays. The kind of man who didn't need to shout to command obedience. His gaze cut through the air and found me immediately. So, he said, voice low but clear, you are the slave who forges like a god. I bowed instinctively, not out of reverence but habit. Soldiers always bow to power, even when they plan to defy it. He dismounted, took up the sword and weighed it in his hand. This balance, no tremor, no flaw. Tell me, stranger, what name does this blade bear? I met his eyes. It has none, your majesty. Not yet. He smiled thinly. Then I shall name it myself. He raised the sword high. From this day it shall be called Selenor, the breath of the heavens, the first weapon of my new army. Cheers erupted from the guards, but I saw something else in the king's eyes. Calculation, unease. He didn't understand what he held, and men fear what they can't explain. When he lowered the blade, Lady Elira stepped forward from behind him. She was dressed not in silk, but in the same deep green cloak from the forge, her hair braided simply. Our eyes met for the briefest heartbeat, and in that silence I understood. She hadn't told him everything. The king gestured toward me. You've earned your freedom, slave. From this moment, you serve not the mines but the crown itself. You'll forge for me, and only me. Freedom. It should have felt like salvation. Instead, it felt like a collar made of gold. They unchained me that afternoon. My wrists were raw, my hands blistered, but the metal felt lighter than the air. Lauren grinned and clasped my shoulder. You did it. You're free. But even as he said it, soldiers dragged him back to the mines. Freedom for one meant chains for another. That night in the royal forge, I stood alone before Selenor. The sword glowed faintly under the moonlight that filtered through the narrow windows. When I ran my fingers along its edge, it vibrated softly, like recognition. You weren't meant for him, I murmured. The door creaked open. Elira slipped inside, her steps soundless. She looked at me, then at the blade. You understand it, don't you? I think it understands me. She approached slowly, eyes bright with that same dangerous curiosity. My father believes he can command it, but this was never a weapon of conquest. The songs say the sky iron was forged to bind worlds, not destroy them. Her fingers brushed the flat of the blade, and the hum deepened, resonating in the walls, the air, even the space between us. I could feel her heartbeat align with mine through the vibration. One rhythm, one pulse. I swallowed hard. If he learns what it truly is, he won't. I'll make sure of it. Her hand lingered near mine. The warmth of her skin made the metal tremble, as if it sensed something sacred. For a moment the world narrowed to the glow of the forge, and her eyes reflecting the flame. There was no king, no chains, no war, only two people bound by a secret neither fully understood. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. The sword is awake, Iron Ghost, and so are you. That night I couldn't sleep. Every breath of wind through the window sounded like a whisper from another world. Somewhere beyond the walls of this castle, the gate was stirring, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if it was calling me home or warning me not to come back. Freedom, I learned, is a fragile illusion, especially when granted by a king. They gave me a new tunic, clean water, a place to sleep above ground. The chains were gone, but guards still followed my every step, their hands resting casually on sword hilts that I myself had forged. The people in the courtyard bowed when I passed, not out of respect, but superstition. They whispered the ghost walks unshackled, as if I were a weapon that had slipped its scabbard. The royal forge was vast and ordered, nothing like the pit I'd worked in before. Rows of apprentices hammered under banners bearing the black sun of Vareth. The air shimmered with heat and pride. Yet beneath it all, I could feel unease, a tremor in the rhythm of hammers, like the breath of men who knew that progress was both blessing and curse. Word of Selenor had spread through the kingdom like wildfire. Nobles came to glimpse it, priests came to pray over it. Some called it divine, others whispered of heresy. The Church of the Ashen Sun, the Empire's spiritual spine, declared that only the king's bloodline could command sacred metal. To forge it without blessing, they said, was blasphemy. The king didn't care. Power loves its reflection too much to question the mirror. Within a week, I was summoned to court. The grand hall glittered with gold and cruelty. The nobles lined the sides like vultures dressed in silk, waiting to see if the foreign ghost would kneel. I did not. The high priest, draped in silver ash robes, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice dry as parchment, "it is not wise to place faith in unnatural craft. The gate's relics were sealed for a reason." The king's jaw tightened. "And yet they make fine weapons. Would you have me surrender advantage to our enemies?" "The enemy," the priest said, glancing at me, "may already be within your walls." A murmur rippled through the hall. I met his gaze. "If you fear the forge, perhaps it is not the fire you doubt, but your own faith to withstand it." The hall fell silent. The priest's lips pressed thin. Elira, standing beside the throne, hid a smile behind her hand. The king chuckled, softly, dangerously. "My ghost speaks boldly. I like that. Leave him be, Father Lurian. He serves me now, not the gate." But even as laughter broke the tension, I saw the shadow in the priest's eyes. It wasn't fear, it was calculation. And calculation is the first note in the Song of Ruin. That night I returned to the forge to find something wrong. The coals were cold, the apprentices gone. The silence was too heavy. On the anvil lay Selenor, its surface dull, its hum faint. Someone had touched it. Then I saw it. A mark burned into the floor beside the anvil. A symbol like a spiral devouring itself. The same one etched on the priest's pendants. Faithful, I muttered. They've started their war. Elora appeared in the doorway, hood drawn low. You shouldn't be here alone. I'm never alone anymore, I said, glancing at the sword. The metal gave a weak tremor, like a heartbeat fading. She moved closer. They'll accuse you of heresy. The priests have been whispering in my father's ear. They say the sword feeds on souls, I gave a hollow laugh. Then it must be starving. But her face was grave. This isn't just politics, Iron Ghost. The Ashen Sun has its own army. Zealots in armor, black as night. If they move against you, even the king may not protect you. I leaned on the anvil, the exhaustion finally catching up. Every world I've lived in ends the same way. Men afraid of what they don't understand. Illyra reached out, her hand finding mine. Then teach them. Teach them what? That the flame you carry doesn't burn. It transforms. For a moment we just stood there, our hands between the living metal and dying coals. Her eyes held something I hadn't seen since the war. Faith, not in gods or kings, but in choice. Outside, a storm gathered. Lightning licked the horizon, lighting the castle towers like jagged teeth. The next morning, the first attack came. The priests' soldiers, the faithful blades, stormed the lower forges, shouting prayers that sounded like curses. They seized the apprentices, set fire to the furnaces, and demanded my arrest. The ghost has awoken the gate, they cried. The curse must be purged. But the blacksmith, that quiet, stoic man, stood between them and me. You'll have to go through me first. And they did. I reached him too late. His body lay beside the shattered anvil, his blood darkening the ashes. His last breath came out as a whisper. Endure the heat, boy. The forge was burning around me, flames licking the walls. Selenor lay where I had left it, untouched, humming louder than ever. I took it in my hand, and the hum became a roar. The flames bent away from me, swirling like a storm around the blade. When the faithful turned to face me, their prayers died in their throats. I wasn't a blacksmith anymore. I was the fire they had tried to kill. They fled, but the damage was done. The king's forges in ruins, the priests screaming blasphemy across the city, and my name now whispered not as miracle, but as monster. Illyra found me in the aftermath, standing amid the ashes, the sword glowing faintly in my grip. What have they made of you? She whispered. I looked down at the blade, then at her. Something they can't unmake. The world had chosen its sides, and I, the stranger, the ghost, the forger of forbidden flame, was now the spark that would test which one could endure the heat. They locked me in the western tower that night, a stone cage above the burning city. The storm hadn't stopped since the attack. Thunder rolled over the rooftops, and every flash of lightning turned the iron bars on my window into veins of blue fire. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The forge master's death clung to me like soot that wouldn't wash off. I kept hearing his last words, endure the heat, and wondering if he'd meant the metal or the world. Below, the palace buzzed with unrest. I could hear shouting, soldiers, priests, servants. Even from the tower, I caught fragments of their fear. The gate stirs again. The sword hums in the dark. The ghost calls the storm. And through it all, Selenor lay beside me on the stone floor, pulsing faintly with light. It shouldn't have been possible. There was no forge, no flame, no hammer. Yet it breathed. Sometimes I thought it was trying to speak. At dawn, the door opened. Not soldiers, Illyra. She moved quickly, closing the door behind her. Her cloak was soaked, her face pale from sleeplessness. She carried a bundle of parchment pressed tight against her chest. "They've decided your fate," she whispered. "By tomorrow's sun, you'll be executed for heresy." I laughed softly. "Efficient." Her hands trembled. "Don't joke. My father signed the order himself." That stopped me cold. "Your father?" She nodded, eyes wet but unbroken. "The priest told him the sword is feeding on your soul, that if it's not destroyed, it will consume you. And the realm." I stared at Selenor, its faint glow reflecting in her eyes. "They're half right," I said. "It is consuming something, but not my soul." Illyra's brow furrowed. "Then what?" I took the parchments from her. They were old, older than this kingdom. The ink had faded, but the symbols were unmistakable, circular, symmetrical, mathematical, not words, designs, schematics. My blood ran cold. I'd seen these lines before. In another world, another war. They weren't ancient symbols, they were blueprints. Power conduits, field matrices, magnetic alignment structures. "Where did you get these?" I asked. "From the royal vaults. They were hidden in my mother's chamber before she died." She hesitated. "She was not born here, Iron Ghost. She came from the north, from the land where the gate was found." My pulse quickened. "Your mother, she told me stories," Illyra continued, "about a city made of glass and lightning, about soldiers who rode thunder, about a sky that split open and swallowed her world." Her eyes searched mine, desperate for understanding. "She said one day the gate would open again, and someone would step through. Someone who carried both ruin and redemption." I felt the room tilt. The storm outside grew louder, as if responding. "You think that someone is me?" "I know it is." Silence. Only the rain between us. Finally, I said, "Then you should hate me, because if what you say is true, the gate didn't bring me here to save this world. It brought me to finish what it started." Illyra stepped closer, shaking her head. "No, you misunderstand. The gate doesn't choose destroyers or saviors. It reveals what's already inside them." Her words pierced something deep. Every act of violence I justified, every life I'd taken in the name of duty, the gate hadn't punished me. It had exposed me. "Then what is Selenor?" I asked quietly. She unrolled another parchment, a diagram of the sword itself. Lines of energy radiated from its hilt, converging into a pattern that mirrored a human heartbeat. "It's not a weapon," she said. "It's a key." "To what?" She hesitated, then whispered, "To the gate, to home." The air seemed to drain from the room. I stared at the blade, the hum now louder, resonating through the stones, through my bones. "But if I open it, you'll leave this world behind." Her voice broke. "And me with it." I looked at her, really looked. The defiance in her face, the fire in her eyes, the softness she fought to hide. I realized then that she wasn't just the king's daughter or the voice of reason among zealots. She was the last echo of a bloodline that still remembered what the gate had done. And maybe she was the reason it had called me here. Lightning split the sky, flooding the chamber with light. For a heartbeat I saw it, a reflection of another world shimmering through the window. The ruined battlefield, the broken machines, the metal arch humming in the rain. Then it was gone. Illyra gripped my hand. "We can't stay. The priests are coming for you tonight." "Where will we go?" "To the mountains. To the gate." The word tasted like both salvation and damnation. As we prepared to leave, I slipped Selenor into its scabbard. The hum deepened, syncing perfectly with the rhythm of my pulse, and faintly with hers. When she turned to face me, hood drawn, eyes burning with purpose, she didn't look like a princess anymore. She looked like prophecy. We stepped into the storm together, and for the first time I didn't fear the thunder. We rode through the storm until the world vanished into gray. The road to the northern mountains wound like a scar through the earth, half mud, half mist. Trees bent in the wind like grieving men, and thunder followed us as if the heavens themselves were marching. Illyra rode ahead, cloak snapping behind her, the hood torn back by rain. She looked like fury given form. By dawn, the city was a smear of smoke on the horizon. The fires I had started burned still. Part of me wanted to look back. The other part, the soldier, knew better. Regret slows the hand that must strike again. When we reached the foothills, the rain turned to sleet. The horses stumbled. We left them and walked. Each step took us closer to the gate, or to death. I wasn't sure which I preferred anymore. Illyra led with grim determination, her hands raw from cold but steady. Between breaths, she spoke of her mother, the stranger who'd arrived from the north, carrying knowledge that no priest could sanctify. She had warned the king that the gate's light would return, and that when it did, someone must stand between worlds or both would fall. "You think that's me?" I said. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. By the third night, we found shelter in the ruins of an old watchtower. The stones were cracked and moss-eaten, but the roof held. I built a small fire while Illyra unrolled the remaining parchments, studying the diagrams by flickering light. Every page showed something more complex, circuits that curved like veins, energy paths shaped like prayers. I realized then what the ancients had done. They hadn't worshipped gods. They had built them. I stared into the fire. If I opened the gate, I could destroy this world. She met my gaze. If you don't, it might destroy you first. Outside, the wind howled like memory. Later, when she slept beside the embers, I rose quietly and drew Selenor. The blades shone dimly, not silver but blue, the hue of old light trapped under ice. I whispered to it, voice trembling, "Tell me what you want." And it answered, not with words but with a vision. I saw the battlefield again, my platoon running through smoke, the world cracking in two as the iron vortex swallowed us. But this time, I wasn't just watching. I was inside it, seeing the gate from the other side. Its walls weren't metal. They were alive, pulsing like the veins of a creature too vast to comprehend. And at its core, I saw her. Not Illyra, but someone who looked like her. The same eyes, the same voice. Older, colder. A woman in a world of machines, holding the sword before the storm. She turned to me and said, "You built the gate, and now you must end it." I gasped and the vision shattered. The fire was almost out. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stumbled to my knees. "You built the gate." I had always believed I'd been thrown through it by chance, a victim of fate. But what if it wasn't fate? What if it was consequence? Illyra stirred, her hand brushing mine. "What did you see?" "Too much." Her eyes softened, but before she could speak, the tower shuddered. A horn sounded from the valley, deep, mournful, metallic. "They've found us," she whispered. I grabbed Selenor, its hum turning sharp, urgent. Outside, torches dotted the slopes like stars falling in reverse. The faithful blades, hundreds of them, climbing fast. Illyra turned to me. "You can't fight them all. I can delay them. You'll die. Then you'll live." She shook her head violently. "No, you're not dying for me." Lightning split the sky again. In that flash of white, I saw what had to be done. There were truths too large for one life to contain, and debts too heavy to pass on. If I was the one who had built the gate, if I had torn the veil between worlds, then my death was already written. I pressed Selenor into her hands. "When the time comes, this blade will open the gate, but only if your heart is steady. Promise me that." Tears mixed with rain on her face. "You're asking me to kill you." "I'm asking you to finish what I began." The tower doors splintered under the first assault. I turned to face them. rows of zealots in black armor, chanting their burning prayers. Elira screamed my name, but her voice drowned beneath the roar of thunder and the song of steel. I moved like a man who had already died once. Each strike was a memory erased, each parry a confession. The sword's hum became music, and the faithful fell one by one into its rhythm. But there were too many. The tower groaned under fire and fury. As I drove the last of them back, a spear found my side. Deep, cold. I stumbled, choking on iron and blood. Ilira's hands caught me before I hit the ground. Her face swam in the smoke. "Don't you dare leave me." I smiled, not from joy, but release. "You said the flame doesn't burn, it transforms." Her fingers closed around Selenor's hilt. The blade glowed bright enough to blind. The tower walls shook. The air filled with the hum of something vast awakening. The gate was calling. "Go," I whispered. "Find it." She refused to let go. "Ilira." I placed my bloodied hand against her cheek. "If I built the gate, maybe you're the reason I crossed it." Then the light consumed us both. When the world returned, I was alone. The tower gone, the field silent, the storm spent. Only Selenor remained, driven into the ground beside me, its glow fading into nothing. And for the first time since dying, I felt truly mortal again. I don't remember how long I lay there. The world after the storm had no time, only aftermath. Ash drifted where snow should have been, and the air still trembled with echoes, as if the gate's voice had spoken and the mountains were trying to remember its words. I should have been dead. The wound in my side had clotted dark and ugly, my breath shallow as rusted bells. Yet every time I slipped toward unconsciousness, something pulled me back. A faint vibration from Selenor, still planted in the frozen earth beside me. Its pulse was slow, steady, human. I realized it wasn't just humming anymore. It was breathing for me. When I finally rose, the world was quieter. The faithful blades had vanished, leaving only their abandoned weapons buried in frost. The tower was gone, erased clean, as if the earth had closed over it. Elira was gone too. I staggered toward the nearest ridge, clutching my side. The sword's hum deepened each time I faced north. It was leading me. Days blurred into one long wound. Hunger faded. Time became meaningless. The only constant was the hum, the promise of something beyond the next horizon. Until at last the mountains parted, and I saw it. The gate. It rose from the valley floor like a wound in the sky. Two colossal arches of metal, fused with stone and frost, pulsing faintly with blue light. The air around it shimmered, distorting shapes and sound. The closer I came, the heavier my heartbeat became, until I couldn't tell if it was my pulse or the gates. I fell to my knees. All this time I believed it had dragged me here by accident, but standing before it again, I understood. It had brought me back to finish what I began. Then I heard her voice. "Don't move." I turned slowly. Ilira stood a few paces away, cloaked in the wind, her face pale and resolute. But something was wrong. Her eyes. They glowed faintly, the same electric blue as Selenor. "You're alive," I whispered, in a manner of speaking. She stepped closer. "When the light took us, it didn't kill me. It changed me. The gate showed me what I am." "What are you?" Her gaze faltered. "Half of what you were. My mother's blood, her knowledge. It wasn't of this world. She was one of your kind, from the time before the fall." The truth struck like lightning. "You're from my world." She nodded. "Half of me is, and half of me belongs here. That's why the gate brought you. Not to destroy or to escape, but to choose. To decide whether this world deserves to live or to burn as yours did." I staggered back, shaking my head. "I didn't come here to play God. You already did once, she said quietly. You built the gate. You opened it, and millions died. Now it's giving you a second chance to end the pattern. I wanted to deny it, to cling to the image of myself as a victim. But deep down, the truth had been waiting for acknowledgement, festering. I had built it. The weapon that tore space open wasn't divine punishment. It was human invention. My invention. And all this time, the gate hadn't been my prison. It had been my trial. Elira stepped closer, eyes softening. You can't erase what you did, but you can change what comes next. Her hand touched mine, cold, trembling. The sword hummed louder between us, its pulse synchronized with ours, beating as one. The gate reacts to emotion, she said. Fear feeds it. Anger tears it open. But compassion, that's what seals it. That's what restores the balance. Her words were fragile hope, and I wanted to believe them. But the mountains trembled again, and from the shadowed slopes below, the army of the faithful appeared. Hundreds strong, banners of the ashen sun cutting through the fog. They had tracked us, drawn by the gate's awakening. Elira's eyes widened. They mean to destroy it, and you with it. I gripped Selenor. Then they'll get their wish. She caught my arm. No, not like before. The gate won't close with violence. If you kill them, it'll open wider. The cycle will start again. Then what do you expect me to do? Watch them slaughter you? I expect you to trust me. She moved toward the gate, her cloak whipping in the wind. The air shimmered around her like heat. I felt the sword resist. It didn't want her near it. The hum turned sharp, almost pleading. Elira! She turned back, smiling faintly. You built the gate from pain. Let's see if love can unmake it. Ah. And then she plunged her hand into the light. The sky screamed. Winds tore through the valley. The soldiers fell to their knees as the mountain shook. I ran toward her, but the force was too strong. It threw me back. The gate's light wrapped around her like molten glass, burning and beautiful. She was dissolving, not dying, transforming. Her voice carried through the storm. Every world needs a bridge, not a wall. You were never sent here to escape your past. You were sent here so I could forgive it. And then she was gone. The light folded inward, swallowing itself until the valley was silent again. Where the gate had stood, only a scar remained. A ring of glassed earth, still warm to the touch. I crawled to it, gasping, Selenor heavy in my arms. The sword was silent now, its hum extinguished. For the first time, the world felt real. Painfully, beautifully real. The gate was gone. So was she. I pressed my forehead to the ground and whispered her name into the ash. Elira! No answer. Only wind. Soft, steady, human. And in that wind, I heard the faintest echo of her words. The flame doesn't burn. It transforms. I stayed there until dawn, the sun rising over the ruined valley, gold light cutting through the cold. And for the first time in both my lives, I began to weep. By the time the snow began to fall, I had buried her with my own hands. No temple, no altar, just the frozen ground beneath the mountain she saved, in the sword she left behind. Selenor, the silent witness of every truth I'd run from. I pressed the blade into the earth above her grave until it hummed faintly again, like a heartbeat mourning its twin. Weeks passed, or maybe years. Time no longer felt sequential. I wandered the ruins of Vareth as a ghost among survivors. The city had burned, but not by the faithful's hands. The gate's final surge had swept through the kingdom like a tide, cleansing what couldn't endure its light. The proud towers were now spires of glass, bending the sunrise into colors the world had forgotten. The king was dead, the faithful scattered, and the people, those who remained, whispered a new legend. The Iron Ghost slew gods and freed men. They were wrong on both counts. I had done neither. I had only survived long enough to understand what those words actually meant. I made my home in the old forge, or what was left of it, rebuilt the roof, rekindled the fire. But when I struck the hammer against metal now, it no longer sounded like war. It sounded like memory. I shaped tools instead of weapons, plowshares, hinges, nails. The hands that once broke worlds now mended them. And yet the nights were long. Sometimes the wind through the cracks of the forge carried a hum so soft I thought it was my imagination, until it began to match my pulse. Selenor, calling me again. I returned to the mountains when spring came, guided by that faint rhythm. The valley where the gate once stood was silent, but not dead. The scar of glass had softened under moss and rain. Flowers bloomed along its edge, glowing faintly blue in the dark. And there, where her grave should have been, the earth was untouched. No mound, no sword, just a smooth circle of metal, gleaming faintly through the soil. I dropped to my knees, my breath catching. Elira! The metal shimmered, then split open, a crack no wider than a hand, and a single pulse of light rose from it, hovering before me. It wasn't cold or divine. It was warm, familiar. Her voice drifted through it like memory made sound. You taught the world to build gates. I taught it to open hearts. Now you must decide which one endures. I reached out, trembling. The light pulsed faster. It was an invitation or a farewell. Behind me the wind shifted, carrying the distant sound of voices. The people of Vareth had followed me. Men, women, children, all pale with fear and wonder. They had seen the light and come seeking answers. The gate returns, someone whispered. He'll open it again. Their eyes, the same mix of hope and dread I'd seen in 100 battlefields. They didn't want truth. They wanted salvation. They wanted a God. And that was the danger. I rose slowly, the glow of the light painting my face in blue. The old soldier in me wanted to touch it, to end the cycle and return to where I came from, if home even existed anymore. The other part, the one forged in this world's fire, knew that doing so would make the same mistake twice. I turned to them, voice steady. There are no more gods, no gate, no salvation. What's left is what we build with our hands, what we choose to protect. The crowd murmured. Some wept. Some fell to their knees. But no one moved. They wanted proof, something divine. So I gave it to them. I took my hammer and struck the light. The sound that followed wasn't thunder or song. It was release. The glow shattered, scattering into countless sparks that drifted across the valley, settling on stone, on snow, on skin. Each spark dimmed, but didn't die. They melted into the world, into its people. The gate was gone, forever this time. The wind went still. I stood alone again, watching the people stare at their hands as faint trails of blue faded into their veins. Power, not divine, but shared. The burden distributed, the truth reborn as ordinary life. I whispered to the wind. She was right. From somewhere deep in the mountains came the echo, soft like a sigh. The flame doesn't burn, it transforms. The people began to rebuild after that, and for once they didn't build walls. They built homes. They forged tools, not swords. The faith of the ashen sun was replaced by the quiet belief that a single act of mercy can shape a kingdom more than any miracle. Years passed. My hair grayed. My hands shook when I worked. But the world held, fragile, human, alive. And sometimes in the forge, when the hammer struck just right, the sparks would rise in the air and form her silhouette for an instant, smiling, radiant, gone again. I would pause then, close my eyes and whisper, "You endured the heat." And in that moment, I'd hear her voice, clear as the first day I met her. So did you. I record these words for whoever finds this forge when the fires have long gone out. The walls around me are blackened, the roof sagging under the weight of 100 winters. Yet the anvil still stands, the same one that bore the first strike of Selenor, the same that rang when the world unmade itself. I am no longer the Iron Ghost. I am just a man, and the sound of metal meeting metal is my only prayer. When I first awoke here, I thought I had fallen into punishment, another version of hell, a world bound by iron instead of wire. But hell isn't a place. It's the refusal to learn. Every world burns when men choose fear over understanding, pride over compassion. I know because I built one such world with my own hands. I thought the gate was my curse. In truth, it was mercy, a mirror that forced me to face what kind of man I had been. It didn't bring me here to change history. It brought me here to remember that forgiveness is the rarest form of creation. Elira taught me that. Her name lives in the rhythm of the forge. Every time I strike the hammer, I hear her, not as voice, but as pulse. She was never meant to stay. She was the last breath of a dying civilization, and I was the echo that refused to fade. Together we became something in between, a spark that outlived its fire. The kingdom she saved has forgotten our names. That's as it should be. Stories turn dangerous when they become scripture. The people now plant gardens where the gate once stood. Children play on the glass plains, their laughter louder than any hymn. They don't know the word iron once meant chains. To them, it only means strength. Sometimes I wonder if I will wake again, in another world, another body, still haunted by the hum of the gate. Perhaps this cycle has no true end, only forms of endurance. But if the gate opens again, I pray whoever steps through carries less pride and more patience. I've left behind the plans, the knowledge, the old tools. Not for war, but for building, because that is what the flame finally taught me. Creation isn't the opposite of destruction. It's the courage to begin again after everything has burned. Tonight will be my last night by the forge. The coals are low, the stars are bright, and the world no longer needs me. I feel her near, not in spirit, but in warmth, like the air itself remembers her shape. I whisper her name one last time, and the wind hums softly, the same note that once filled the gate. The metal glows faintly under my touch, not from fire, but from memory. I rest my hand on it and close my eyes. If there is a third life, I think, let it be an ordinary one. Let it be free of gates, of war, of gods. Let it be a quiet life, spent making things that last longer than I do. The forge sighs as the final ember dies. Outside, dawn breaks. Soft gold spreading across the fields once torn by flame. Somewhere in that light, I feel her hand in mine. The hum fades. The silence is full. And for the first time, I understand what it means to endure the heat, not to survive it, but to become it.